Here's Charlie Kirk to try to convince college students that evolution isn't real.
My name is Jaden, and the topic I want to raise is about evolution versus creation. So it's not as political, but it certainly has political implications. And for reference, I was raised Catholic, and it never really resonated with me. It always felt a little overbearing, and I could never find truth in a Catholic or a Christian worldview. And I started just reading books and listening to podcasts that talk a lot about evolution and natural selection and those principles. And I find that's a much better lens to look at the world. For instance, you talk about a meritocracy. All that is natural selection. The cream rises to the top. Sure. I mean, it's apparent in so many fields. Look around at all these beautiful buildings. That comes from architecture. The good ideas stick, the bad ideas fall out of the gene pool. And I want to know why, your thoughts on natural selection and why it doesn't apply to humans.
Yeah, this is not a topic I know the best, but I have strong opinions on, so you have to understand I'm not as literate as I should be.
From what I've seen, that's true of every topic about which Charlie opines.
But I'm a strict creationist, but that's fine. But there's spectrums on creationism and evolution. So do you acknowledge that maybe God created the evolution as a shepherded evolution throughout time? Because that's a nuanced opinion.
No, because I don't think God is a coherent concept.
I acknowledge that there's a distinct beginning to the universe. Okay, right. Albert Einstein, for instance, against his original view, believed
for sure.
That
so if there's a beginning, is there a beginner?
No, if there is a beginning to the space-time continuum, that would also be the beginning of time. And since you can't cause something to come into existence when it's already in existence, and since there was never a time when time didn't already exist, the space-time continuum cannot have been brought into existence.
That's the question. And who is that beginner?
No,
Why is it Christ?
It has to be, right? Because
yes.
The laws of logic. Okay, great.
No, there doesn't have to be a beginner. Time itself can't have a beginner at all, and it's not impossible for other things to come into existence without a cause. Charlie sounded like he was about to argue that the laws of logic require things which begin to exist to have a cause, but there is no such law of logic. We can't use logic to prove that causation is even a real thing. William Lane Craig commonly argues that everything which begins to exist has a cause, but he doesn't say that this is a logical necessity. He inductively infers it from the fact that we don't see things just pop into existence without any apparent cause.
So then there is that beginner is God, or the idea of God, right? And so then we as creationists believe the universe has a beginning, end point, right? A beginning point and an end point.
Yep. Creationists believe that the universe has an end point?
We believe it's God. I could walk you through why I believe that in the shortest period of time. But as far as creation, evolution hinges on far more faith than creation. To believe that the way that we are currently composed and having species change is an act of faith.
How is it an act of faith when we can directly see it happen? Biologists have directly witnessed populations speciate from one another.
A favorite example of that are the Encetina salamanders living all around California's San Joaquin Valley. As they slowly spread along that circular mountain range, they developed as a series of subspecies all along the way, which were fertile with each other, but once they closed that loop, they were too genetically different to interbreed with those on the original point. As you encircle this ring, subspecies A may breed with subspecies B, and B may breed with C, and C with D, but A and D cannot interbreed because by the time their territories overlap again, closing that geographic ring, they've grown too distant genetically and can't come back.
Since we can see speciation with our own two eyes, why would it require faith to believe in it?
Now, Darwin was more of an adaptionist than an evolutionist, in the sense that he proved adaptation, but he did not prove evolution.
What do you think the difference is exactly?
He theorized evolution. He could be right. Oh, I don't think he is. But he through his finches, he wrote that, yes, animals or birds will adjust to the environment of which they are in. We do not have any evidence, nor can you. You can guess in the fossil record of actual species change. Does that make sense?
You can infer species change from the fossil record, and you can also see it in living populations. Evolution is slow, but speciation isn't so slow that we can't directly see it. We can see it. However, even if we couldn't see speciation directly, it wouldn't be faith to infer it from the fossil evidence. This is especially the case given that what we infer from the fossil record is corroborated by genetics. Hebrews 11:1 defines faith as assurance of what you do not see. It is not an inference based on what we do see. The theory of evolution is based on what we do see.
Yep. There's a lot of psychological things too in humans. Like one example I'll bring up is, I mean, would you say as a general rule of thumb, like women are the sexual gatekeepers and men are the sexual pursuers?
Yeah.
Oh no, he's been listening to the Red Pill podcasts hosted by people who think they understand evolution.
That distinction can be explained by evolution, right? A female's eggs in her body is a finite resource, whereas a man's sperm is basically infinite, meaning the woman has to protect. There's more of a cost when she has to raise a baby.
But maybe God made it that way, right?
So God made men to be promiscuous by nature and then made it a sin to act according to the nature that he gave them?
Maybe. But a lot of things like that point towards evolution of some sort.
For sure, but I think I think you're close because you're marveling in the design.
Yep.
And then therefore we believe it was designed.
He's marveling at what he perceives to be order in nature. Order is not the same thing as design.
I think evolution can give off the impression of design because it is so intricate. Even like something like religion, I would explain in terms of evolution and natural selection. Like over time, religions change. For instance, there's plenty of denominations of Christianity. So, like religion is not a
I don't want to spend too much time on this,
time.
but I think you would agree with our perspective that even looking at this objectively with reason, there's something improbable of our existence.
How do you figure? Given what we know about how physics and chemistry works, our existence makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
And that improbability could be a roll of the dice of chromosomal gene mutations over trillions of years.
First of all, it's not just gene mutations, it's also natural selection, which is not a roll of the dice. It's a very deterministic process. Secondly, nobody who believes in evolution believes it occurred over trillions of years. As best we can tell, there haven't even been trillions of years. If it had occurred over trillions of years, that would make the evolution of humans even more probable.
Or it actually could be something a lot simpler, which is there's something above us that just designed us.
That's not simpler because it requires us to assume the existence of an undemonstrated entity, while evolution works using entities and processes that we can directly observe, and is itself a process we can directly observe.
And so I actually think the designing argument is far more rational because you look at how we're built, you look at the trillions of chromosomes within us, how our body works, the DNA sequencing.
It sounds impressive if you say there are trillions of chromosomes within us until you realize that there are just trillions of copies of the same 46 chromosomes.
It's hard to believe all that is an act of the dice.
It's not. Natural selection is not an act of the dice.
And that is what evolution contests.
No, it isn't.
Is that it's a lot of, it would be like rolling snake eyes 23 billion times in a row.
No, it would be like rolling snake eyes after a filter eliminated most of the dice that had any numbers on them other than the number 1.
That's how improbable evolution is.
My contention with that would be like, evolution is like, it's unchanging. It doesn't put us at the center of everything. So a lot of people explain it's like the good of the species, but truly it's just the good of the gene, passing on the genes that stick. It can be subconscious.
Of course, I don't disagree with any of that. We just think all of that was designed into us.
Okay.
Right?
And so is your belief that God made the universe and then
I believe
implemented?
So I believe what the scriptures say, which is that God created the earth and then God created man,
By blowing into some dust?
and that we are here. The period of time I don't get into. Strong opinions is 6,000 years, 6 million years. I don't really care that much. I think it's more important morally that God predated the universe.
It's more important morally that God predated the universe? Also, how exactly do you predate time itself?
The universe was made at his direction, then nature was made, then animals were made, then man was made.
The universe is distinct from nature?
In that sequencing. And I think that's an important sequencing.
Why? Do you think it's morally important?
Yeah, and I agree that there should be, if we believe that there's a start of the universe, there has to be a beginner.
For sure.
Why? What would it mean for a cause to exist without there already being a universe to exist within? What would it mean for something to occupy reality without having location in space-time?
And I also disagree with ethical subjectivism, where that's you're entitled to your own moral. But I feel like there is one truth. There has to be.
There has to be, right?
And your argument is God provides us that truth through the Bible. But then why is your truth the truth?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So
Why would moral statements have to have any objective truth? And how would the existence of a God establish that truth? Even if there is a God, there's no objective, non-circular reason why we ought to follow his moral prescriptions.
Because but through both reason and revelation, though. So God gives us both. Revelation, of course, is the scriptures. Reason is our ability to interact with the natural world to see if the scriptures are actually true.
Reason clearly shows that a lot of what's in the scriptures is not actually true.
So why is Christianity true? Well, first, let's just test the 10 Commandments. If you follow the 10 Commandments, your life will be objectively better and your society will be objectively better.
Objectively better by what standard? If the answer is God's standard, then your argument is circular. You're effectively saying that if people conform to God's standards, then society will conform to God's standards. It's a meaningless tautology.
Right? I mean, not killing, not murdering, not stealing, honoring your parents.
Well, the commandments don't forbid both killing and murdering.
Not having anything above the idea of a sovereign God, right? Resting for 1 day a week, not lying.
The commandment doesn't forbid lying per se, it only forbids telling a specific kind of lie, that is to say, giving false testimony.
These are things that we can all agree, like, okay, that's a good way to build society. But let me just one thing, the two miracles that Christianity hinges upon is creation, which I think you're almost there-ish, that there was a beginning to everything. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and then the resurrection. And the resurrection is the greatest, most documented miracle in human history.
Greatest is subjective, but what do you mean by most documented? There aren't even any eyewitness accounts about it.
And we believe, of course, it to be true. It defies every other historical explanation.
Literally every naturalistic explanation is more probable than resurrection. Even if there is a God who brings people back to life, he seems to do so with such infrequency that lies, cases of mistaken identity, and hallucinations are all vastly more common occurrences and thus more probable explanations.
So in order for an atheist to be able to wrestle with the resurrection, you must answer, who is Jesus Christ?
He's a guy who thought he was the prophesied Messiah, which, by the way, was never prophesied to be executed by the powers he opposed, much less to pay for our sins.
Okay, what happened to his body?
I suspect it was stolen because the Gospels give what looks very much to be a contrived rebuttal to folks who claimed that to be the case. They say that the guards who were posted at Jesus' tomb saw him walk out of it, got scared and ran away, then were paid to say that the disciples stole the body. This is awfully suspicious because what's the point of there being guards at Jesus' tomb in the first place, and what kind of shitty guards let a guy who is supposed to be executed just get up and walk away? This sounds like a made-up story to me.
Why did all of his followers die a death voluntarily afterwards?
They didn't. I think Charlie means that they were martyred, and it's common for apologists to claim that the disciples were martyred for saying that Jesus rose from the grave. There is not one single document that says that they were martyred specifically for the belief in the resurrection. Since they were followers of a guy who tried to overthrow the Roman occupation of Judea, that's enough of a reason for the Roman authorities to want to martyr them, whether they believe Jesus rose from the grave or not.
Why were all the original witnesses women, which in the old world you never would have had women witnesses, right? A lot of misogyny back then.
One possible explanation is that they were going to anoint the body, which is a ritual typically performed by women. The Gospels are inconsistent with one another about how the empty tomb was found, so it's hard to take them as reliable. One is even internally inconsistent, because Mark says that the ladies said nothing to anyone about the tomb being empty, which doesn't make any sense because if they said nothing to anyone, how did the author of Mark find out about it?
Why did we have all these people that from the first threshold, the second threshold, eyewitnesses say that Jesus Christ rose from the dead?
None of the gospel accounts of the resurrection are from eyewitnesses.
So all of this, canon, and I don't expect you to believe it, is hinging on that one event. So it's not about Jonah the whale, it's not about part of the Red Sea, it's creation, resurrection, that's it. Yeah, and if those two things are true, everything else in the Bible can be true. Does that make sense?
No, that doesn't logically follow at all. Even if those two things are true, that doesn't at all mean that the flood could be true or women being made from a rib could be true.
Yeah, and I agree that for an atheist to try to disprove theism, or at least Christianity, it would be almost impossible to say, why would people die to say, Jesus died on the cross for me and I saw it.
We have no evidence that anybody died for that specific claim, but even if we did, that would just be evidence that they believed it, not that it was true.
Why would I admit, I'm from your perspective, why would I admit, yeah, I saw him die and rise from the dead?
Well, no, yeah, for example, and so again, the answer people would give is like the Jonestown cult, that people can do really crazy stuff if they're convinced by a certain leader. I'm not convinced by that argument, but for example, like James, the half-brother of Jesus, Paul, who had no reason whatsoever, formerly Saul, persecuted Jews, led a great life, converted to Christianity, died a terrible death in prison.
The description in Acts of Paul's encounter with Jesus says that he saw a light and heard a voice claiming to be the voice of Jesus. This sounds like a very typical delusion or hallucination.
from the upside down resurrection of Thomas. Like,
The upside down resurrection of Thomas? I think he means the upside down crucifixion of Peter. Again, there is no evidence that he was crucified for believing in the resurrection. He was crucified after Nero blamed Christians for the Great Fire of the year 64. Whether they believed that Jesus rose from the dead was entirely irrelevant.
these people had no reason to die the way they did, yet they saw something that compelled them to all of a sudden put everything on the line, which was the belief that Jesus rose from the dead.
There is literally no evidence at all for that.
Now, believe this is what's crazy. The Romans gave them an opportunity saying, you can believe in Jesus, you just can't say he rose from the dead. They said, no, I refuse to give an inch on that.
Not true. Literally not one document from the time says anything like that. As the New Testament scholar Bart Ehrman explains,
and an earlier point that Bill made, that the disciples were all willing to die for their faith. I didn't hear one piece of evidence for that. I hear that claim a lot, but having read every Christian source from the first 500 years of Christianity, I'd like him to tell us what the piece of evidence is that the disciples died for their belief in the resurrection.
to everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.